What was the I'm done moment in your last relationship? The I'm done moment was when a little plastic clip-lock baggie fell out of his jean pockets on the 5th of October this year. Go back in time 3 years, he lost his job, and not so slowly his behavior started to change. He refused to get another job. He was fighting for unfair dismissal with Fair Work, and he was going to win and get a massive settlement that never eventuated. Then he started a failed business venture, funded by me, of course. Eventually I made him get an actual job, but he was never happy in a role, and would change jobs every 6 months or so. We'd become engaged on an overseas trip, planned before he lost his job. I hesitated when he asked me, but we had the trip ahead of us and I felt a bit of pressure to say yes, so I did. But I had reservations. That should have been the moment it ended. But I didn't have the guts/strength/commitment/resolve. When we got back, we started wedding planning, but I was never excited to plan. That should probably have been a sign. Actually booking things and made me feel uneasy. But after a while, the wedding fever took hold of me, and before I knew it the wedding was planned. While I planned things, he spent increasing amounts of time in our neighbor's shed, tinkering on things, painting things, working on his car. It bothered me more than perhaps it should have, that he spent time over there. If I'm honest, part of me knew it wasn't going to work out with us. We were different people, him a spender, me a saver. When he was jobless he racked up a $14,000 credit card debt that I paid off for him. We would have been crippled under the interest. He refused to sell his financed car, despite not being able to afford the repayments. It was repossessed 3 times. I paid it out for him on 2 occasions. Once I had started maternity leave and exhausted my savings and could no longer afford it, his nan paid it out the final time. Eventually he sold it, after I listed it on car sales. But he was so despondent about it, he believed it to be the only thing he had in his life. His car was his identity. Meanwhile, I never seemed to support him in the way he needed. I paid the mortgage, utilities, groceries, renovations, everything. But according to him, I didn't tell him everything was going to be okay enough. I wasn't a mate, a friend for him or to him. 6 months out from the wedding we fell pregnant. I thought, cliché that it is, he would change. We would spend more time together, that the baby would bring us closer, that he would want to grow up and be a good father. 4 days out from going into labor, I learned he has lost his job again. I hear this because a friend of his was using the company and had been told my now husband was no longer working there. He denied losing his job, maintained he would be returning to work there. But of course, that was a lie. After our baby was born and 2 weeks of paternity leave, he pretended to go to work for 4 days. I rang the company to be told that he no longer worked there. When I confronted him, he was livid at me for checking up on him. He blamed me, said I was not approachable to talk to, I was too concerned with bills, paying the mortgage, that I put all of these things above his mental health and well-being. Banks could wait. He was out of work for 4 months after our baby was born. Yet he didn't help much with the baby. We continued to hemorrhage money. He would take cash out constantly. When I confronted him, he told me he was spending it on a psychologist. He was deeply depressed. This was heartbreaking for me, but something niggled at me. Why pay cash? I asked for proof. He said, how dare I ask for that? I asked him to see his GP for a mental health care plan to help subsidize the cost of the psychologist. He refused. As it turns out, there was no psychologist. My husband was self-treated/self-abusing with methamphetamine. I left him earlier this year, but went back when he admitted his addiction and promised to get help. I thought I could help him. Again, I stupidly hoped that he might change. But of course he did not. I returned on strict conditions: financial transparency, drug and alcohol counseling and support, maintain a job, couples counseling, etc. None of these were upheld, and instead he issued me a list of conditions of his own. Be sexy, be fun, be spontaneous. Not always easy when you have a 5-month-old constantly in your arms. He also told me I was never to leave like I did the first time, stealing away in the early hours of the morning, and take his son from him. I made a few more attempts to leave but never seemed to be able to fully commit to leave. Leaving as a whole, the house, the 2 dogs, our son, it seemed so hard. 7 months on. Behaviors were unchanged. In fact, things were escalating. He regularly threatened sewer slide. I walked on eggshells, terrified to set him off. We had toxic fights where we would engage in horrific verbal abuse. The emotional abuse was worst. I began to believe that I was domestically abusing him because I held all the financial control, his words, when in reality all I was trying to do was keep us afloat. I found repeated evidence of his ongoing meth use, but he would deny it. The bags were from ages ago. He had just found them in the shed and hadn't got around to throwing them away. He refused to seek help, said he didn't need therapy, he could beat it on his own. By this stage I knew I would never lead a happy life if I stayed. Worse, I was worried our behavior would start to impact on my son. By staying, I was permitting my husband's behavior and saying it was okay for him to treat me like a doormat. And I am not a doormat. Somewhere I had lost myself. But I am determined that my son sees me as the strong, capable and resilient woman I know myself to be. So when that little bag fell out of his jean pocket I knew we were done. I had come back before. I had tried to make us work. I was done. We fought. He told me to get out. And so I grabbed our son and we left. It's been almost 2 months. It feels like pushing a rock up a hill a lot of the time. I can't wait for the house to be sold, as I am still paying for the mortgage despite not living there, since he is still without work.